All right, now we're going to talk about t-test. So Chapter 8, Section G. And so here's the definition of a t-test. It's a statistical test used to compare the averages or mean of two different groups. And it's used to compare the two groups together. So when I'm referring to the average of one group, you usually see a lowercase x with a line over it, and that represents the average of one group. If you see the x with the line over it with a subscript 2, that means the average of the other group. We won't actually be calculating the average, we'll just be entering the data into a table. Okay, so the null hypothesis is when we when we find out that the averages of both groups are essentially the same. So the null hypothesis states that there is no difference between group 1 and group 2. And we'll see an example with that in just a minute. The alternative hypothesis states that the different groups are not equal. So if they're not equal, then we can talk about the alternative hypothesis in two ways. We can either say discuss it in a two-tailed test or a one-tailed test. Now, let me explain what two-tailed and one-tailed mean. Two-tailed simply means we just want to know, are the two groups the same or are they not? A one-tailed group is when we want to see, not only do we want to know if the two groups are the same or not, but we want to know which group has a greater value or a lesser value. Okay, and we'll be doing an example of this in a minute. If you need to pause to copy this down, please do so. Okay, so we're going to be using the calculator in a few minutes to calculate the t-value, and the calculator also gives you something called a p-value. Now the t-value can be used and converted to get a p-value, but as far as the IB test is concerned, you're only going to need the p-value. Okay. So IB test will either do it in they'll discuss a 1%, 5%, or 10% significance, and we're going to do an example right now discussing 5% significance. So if we have a 5% significance, then that means if the p-value is less than 5%, we don't accept the null hypothesis. And if the p-value is greater than 5%, we do accept the null hypothesis. And what does that mean? When we accept the null hypothesis, it means that the data, there is no difference between the two groups. Now let's look at some examples with some numbers. Okay. First, we'll do the example that this is number 7 in your textbook for S8G. Okay, so if I have my data here, and notice in the first sentence tells me whether I'm going to do a two-tailed or a one-tailed test. MacArthur gives his two chemistry tests. He wants to see if there's a difference between the two groups. Okay, that's all it says. He didn't say whether he cares which one is greater or not. So if we just want to know if there's a difference only, and that's all we care about, then we do the two-tailed test. Okay, so I'm going to enter this data into my calculator. So I'm going to hit Stat, and then hit Enter. Okay, and then I need to type in this data. So 54, 62, 67, 43, 85, 69, 73, 81, 47, 92, 85, 89, 68, 72. Okay, and then group 2, type this information, 73, 67, 58, 46, 51, 48, 82, 81, 67, 74, 7, 66. Okay. It doesn't matter that the columns don't have the same number of values here. Okay, so I've entered the two columns here. So now I'm going to perform a two-tailed t-test. So I'm going to hit Stat. I'm going to arrow over to where it says Test. Okay, and then I'm going to choose select 4, which says 2 sample t-tests. So I'm going to go down to number 4, which says 2 sample t-tests. There's all kinds of different tests here. We're going to do the 2 sample t-tests for a two-tailed test. Now it says data, which is fine, L1 and L2, that's where we entered our columns, frequency 1, and then here we are going to highlight this here. You're going to use this one highlighted when you're only doing a two-tailed test. Okay, and then I go arrow down to calculate, and now I hit enter. And now it gives me I have to arrow down a little bit. Oh, I guess I don't have to arrow down. Okay, well, whatever. So when I do this, I end up with my p-value, and I get this value. And since the p-value is greater than 0.5, we are going to accept the null hypothesis. Okay. We have this t-value. On the test, you still need to write down the t-value, even though we're not going to really be using it for much of anything. Okay, so we're accepting a null hypothesis. And part A of this question said, what is the null hypothesis? The null hypothesis is that there is no difference between the grades of the two groups. The alternative hypothesis states that there is a difference between the two groups. Okay, and so this is a two-tailed t-test, and we only care if the populations are different, if it's a two-tailed test. Okay, you may want to hit pause to copy this down. And now I'm going to do a one-tailed t-test. Okay, the instructions are on this handout, this page. So if you go to class resources, you can download these handouts, or at least view them and copy this into your notebook if you can't download them. Okay, an oil company claims to have developed a new fuel that will increase the distance of travel per liter of fuel. There's 10 scooters that are going to be filled with 1 liter of the normal fuel, and 10 scooters filled with the liter of the new fuel. Okay, so in this kind of situation, we want to know which fuel is better. So for that reason, we want to do the one-tailed t-test. We don't want to just know if they're different or not. We want to know which fuel is better. So now I'm going to enter this data here. So I'm going to hit Stat and enter, just like we did before. Stat, enter. Okay, so I'm going to need to clear this data, so I have to arrow up to the top. Hit clear, do not hit delete. Hit clear and enter. Go to the top, clear and enter. Don't hit delete, because you'll lose the column and you don't want to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to enter the data here. So 36, 38, 44, 42, 45, 39, 48, 51, 38, 43. Okay, and then 43, 39, 51, 49, 53, 48, 52, 46, 53, 49. Okay, I've entered the two columns, and now I'm going to perform the one-tailed t-test. So I'm going to go to Stat and arrow over to Tests, and this time I'm going to arrow down. Okay, same place. So I'm going to go down to 4 with the 2 sample t-tests. Okay, I hit enter. looks the same as before, but there's going to be one change. I'm going to change where it says not equal to U2, and we're going to change that to less than U2. Okay, enter, and that changes it. And then I'm going to go down to calculate, and then I hit enter. And then after I've hit enter, I get these values, and I see that my p-value is very tiny. Okay, so since the p-value, so we've got 0.00561. Since that is less than 0.05, that means we don't accept the null hypothesis. And if we don't accept the null hypothesis, that means there is a difference between the two groups. And with this kind of problem, you would hope there's a difference between two groups. You would hope that the new fuel would get you further than the old fuel. Okay, I hope this helps you with your assignments.